Okay, I think everyone that was waiting to come is in now. So I'll get started and people will join as they arrive. Um, Welcome back, everybody, to the Birds of Newfoundland series, webinar series. We're happy to see lots of folks out again tonight to join us. Tonight I'll be talking about sparrows, finches, and grosbeaks. And yeah, hopefully it'll be an informative night for everybody. My name is Jenna McDermott, for those of you who are new here, and I am the assistant coordinator for the Newfoundland Breeding Bird Atlas. We also have Catherine Dale on the call here. She's the assistant coordinator, and she'll be helping me tonight by managing the chat and doing some behind the scenes sort of stuff. So we'll get started here. We both work for an organization called Birds Canada. And it's a nonprofit organization that has offices across the country. And our mission is to drive action to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of birds in Canada. And to do that, we really rely on a lot of citizen science projects. So we have lots of projects across the country. And citizen science projects are basically or citizen scientists, I guess I should say, are basically regular people who have an interest in birds in this case. And so they join our programs and collect data and send the data back to us so we can apply it to our programs and help conserve birds. So we in Canada right now have over 70,000 volunteers each year that are sharing their time and their energy to give us bird observations for our programs, which is pretty incredible. Right now in Newfoundland, we are running two different programs. The main one that Catherine and I work on is the Newfoundland Breeding Bird Atlas. We will be having a webinar solely on the Breeding Bird Atlas in a few weeks. I can't remember the date, but maybe Catherine could put it in the chat. But just a quick overview for anybody who's new. You've heard this spiel if you've been to a few of these webinars already, so I apologize. But the intention of the atlas is to map how many and where all of the birds are that breed on the island of Newfoundland. So for example, you can see on the map on the top right, that is the map for where we have found dark-eyed juncos in the last 3 years that we've been running the program. So we're still doing this for 2 years coming, and this is a project that anybody can be involved in, no matter how many bird species you know. So if, for example, you have juncos that nest in your yard or like on your propane tank, which I've seen pictures of before, that's all information that is really important to us in the Atlas. So feel free to reach out if you want to get involved or have any sightings that you want to talk about. We're always happy to hear about it. We also run the Atlantic Nocturnal Owl Survey in Newfoundland, Newfoundland and Labrador. This one will be starting up pretty soon, just at the beginning of April. And it's a really good program as well for new birders because there aren't too many species of owls that you need to know in order to successfully do a survey for these. So basically it's a roadside survey. You play a recording and listen to see what owls call back to you, and then write that information down and send it in to us. So it's really cool survey and fun for a family event or bring some friends out on the road with you. So get in touch if you're interested in that one as well. Before we get going, I would like to acknowledge that the lands that we're running these programs on are the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and those people have been erased forever. And additionally, I'd like to acknowledge that the island of Newfoundland is the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq people. And these people have been protecting and stewarding the land here since time immemorial. Through the work of our Birds Canada programs, we hope to assist this stewardship in protecting all of the species that we share this island with. And Birds Canada understands that Indigenous voices, knowledge, and ongoing work on the land are critical for wild birds to thrive in sustainable ecosystems. We support the needs, aspirations, and rights of Indigenous peoples to care for the land. you see I have this link here, nativeland.ca on the bottom. And if you're interested in learning about what ancestral lands you live on or you work or play in, I would recommend that as a good place to start exploring. I'll also just take a second to thank our partners and funders who without their support, we wouldn't be able to do the programs that we do in Newfoundland. And also to all of you who continue to come out to our webinars. It's really great to have so much support from the public. Tonight, we have 20 species that we're going to go through. We should get done in time tonight without too much trouble. We'll be going through the sparrows, the grosbeaks, the finches, and also old world sparrows. I'll explain all of these as the night goes on. And as usual, I'll be showing pictures of adults and breeding plumage that breed on the island of Newfoundland. So we do sometimes have visitors, vagrants or rarities that come by, but I'll be talking about the ones that breed in Newfoundland. And a lot of these species, the males and the females actually look the same. So I will show only just one picture in some cases, or where the male and female look different, I'll be showing 2 pictures. We'll begin with the sparrows tonight. And you can see from this picture, all these pictures here, that sparrows are, each of these is a different species. Sparrows can be pretty difficult to identify because a lot of them are small and brown. They sort of hide in the shrubs and they dive quickly under cover, so you may not get a really great look at them. But we'll go through some of the key pointers today. So hopefully, even if you get just a quick look at a bird, you should be able to start trying to identify what they are. You'll notice that all of these species here on the page have the same shaped bill. It's a short conical bill, and they're using that to crack open small seeds since they need some strength there. So that's something to look at to just identify that you have a sparrow generally. They also will collect insects in the spring and the summer. So they have a bit of a varied diet during the year. Things that I'll be pointing out tonight to identify the different species are patterns on the breast, and as well as patterns on the face and head. And those are 2 really important places to look at for birds generally, but especially for sparrows, who can be pretty tricky. When we're talking about markings on the face, there's specific areas that have typical traits that will either be present or absent, or have a variation in color. So you can have color on the crown, or nothing on the crown. You can have a color in the supercilium or eyebrow, which is that stripe above the eye there. Same thing with having or not having an eye line. It can either go just behind the eye only, or go behind and in front of the eye all the way to the bill. Similarly, you can have a color in the lores, which is that section in front of the eye between the bill and the eye. There's a patch on sort of the cheek, I guess, that's called the auriculars. It often has a different color. Then they have a mustachial stripe. You imagine they have a little mustache coming off the corner of their bill. They have the malar area. That always sounds like a weird word to me, but maybe I'm saying it wrong. And then some birds have a malar stripe, or some don't have a malar stripe. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then, of course, we look at the color of the throat. And then the nape is just the color near the back of the neck that also can have varying colors as well. On the crown specifically, there's different names for the different stripes up there. You have the median crown stripe, which is the stripe through the middle of the head. And then you have lateral crown stripes, which are the stripes beside on the sides of the head. So we'll be using all of these markers to look at the different species today. So this is our first sparrow of the night. This is the chipping sparrow. The chipping sparrow is actually only found in the southwestern portion of Newfoundland. So you won't be finding them up in the Northern Peninsula or anything, except for in a rare occasion, I suppose. When we look at their breast and belly, you'll see that it's completely unmarked. There's no streaks or spots. It's really quite a brilliant gray, like a bright grayish white color, all the way in their underparts. If you look to their head, you'll see that they have a black eye line. It goes all the way through the eye, goes behind the eye, and all the way up to the bill as well. So the fact that it's in front of the eye is a very important mark for that. They have a dark gray bill, and they have a rufous crown. So rufous is just a word for like a reddish brown, and it's a common word describing the color of bird feathers. So they have a rufous crown. And then if you look at the picture on the right there, where it's pointed downward a little, you can see that it also has a bit of a dark section at the bottom of the crown, or the bottom of by the forehead area. Chipping sparrows, if you happen to be around forested towns, like they'll be present in towns along roadways and stuff that have trees, and they do favor coniferous trees when they are available. The next sparrow we have is the American tree sparrow, and sort of opposite to the chipping sparrow, this bird in the summertime is actually mostly found in the Northern Peninsula only, rather than the rest of the province. And during the winter, they can be found a little bit more widespread, but in the summer, they are only breeding on the Northern Peninsula. They live in open shrubby habitat or tundra type habitat, which explains much of why they live where they do in Newfoundland. When we are identifying them, if you look at the picture on the top right, you'll see that they have a pretty unmarked breast and belly, but they do have a dark central spot there. And all of the American tree sparrows should have that. And then they have a little bit of coloration on the sides, on their sides, that's sort of a creamy brown color. Their bill is quite interesting. It's the only bill that has a different color on the top and the bottom. So they have a bicolor bill with yellow on the bottom and black on the top. What else do we need to look at with these guys? So they also have a rufous crown, and then they have, instead of having a paler sections on their face, they have gray around the supercilium, which is the eyebrow, and the rest of the face. And then you'll notice on their wings, they have 2 bright white wing bars. One other thing to look at is the eye line, and you'll see that the eye line only goes behind the eye, and it's red colored, and it's not in front of the eye towards the bill. Here's another sparrow, the Savannah sparrow. It looks a little bit different. It's definitely more brownish colored rather than that reddish rufous color. When we look at the breast and belly of this bird, you'll see that they have a white belly, but they have fine streaking, fine brown streaking all down the breast area. And then there's sort of a smudgy spot in the center of the breast as well. When you look at their face, a key mark for them is that they have yellow lores, and that's that area in front of the eye. So that's something to look for on Savannah sparrows. It can vary a little bit between being really bright yellow like this one, and some of them are a little bit paler, but they will all have a little bit of yellow there. And then you see they have brown and white stripes on top of their head. Their bill is also pink. The color of bills is sometimes tricky to tell, because if they have a dirty bill from eating something, or like they're far away, then that's sometimes difficult to see. But the markings on the breast and the head are often easier to tell. The Savannah sparrow is one of my favorites because you often find them in open habitat, like grassy areas where there's little small shrubs, or in bogs with small shrubs. And so you might not necessarily see them, but you'll often hear them. and they're found all throughout Newfoundland. So you might recognize the song. I'll play it for you here. And I think, or personally, I find they say sort of their name. So they say Savannah. So I'll let you listen. Hopefully you can hear that. I think it will play again. So that's the Savannah sparrow. The next sparrow is the song sparrow. This bird is usually found in kind of shrubby areas near ponds or streams or in coastal areas. So they are a little bit associated with water. They are a little bit more common in the south of the island, and you can find them around towns as well as in more remote areas. The belly of the song sparrow is also completely white, but then they do have coarse brown streaking on the breast area and sides. And they do also have a dark central spot on the breast where those streaks come together in a spot. If you look at their throat, you'll see that they have a white throat, and beside the white throat, you will see a broad, dark malar stripe. So that's the stripe that is bordering the white throat. And it's really, in song sparrows, it's quite distinct and always quite broad and dark. That's something to look for song sparrows. You'll see that the bird as a whole on the back and the head is sort of a rich brown and rufous kind of color. And they also have a dark rufous eye line that goes just behind the eye rather than in front as well, and a mustachial stripe too. So they have kind of all the stripes you could have on the face, and they're all this rufous color. And then they do have brown and gray stripes on their crown. This next bird is the Lincoln sparrow. You might think it looks quite similar, but there are a few things to tell them apart again. So this bird also has streaking on the breast and the sides, but if you look at how the streaks are, they're really fine and crisp. So it's like someone's painting very carefully with a little paintbrush instead of just sort of splotching the paint on like we saw with the song sparrow. So the Lincoln sparrow really has these fine, crisp streaks on both the front and also on the back. There's like fine streaking down the back as well. And in the areas that have streaks on them, the color underneath of it is also sort of this buffy cream brown color as well. So it's a different shade rather than gray and different from the white belly. You'll notice that they don't have a malar stripe, or if they do, it's just very faint, not like we saw in the song sparrow that it was so broad. And they do have a broad gray eyebrow and then brown stripes on top of their head. And if you get a really good look at them, you will also see that they have a ring around their eye that is sort of a buffy cream color. Lincoln sparrows are typically found in open areas as well, like bogs or areas with thick shrubs. And they are found all across Newfoundland, but not quite as much on the Avalon Peninsula. This next bird is the swamp sparrow. If you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you'll see that it doesn't have really streaking on the breast and belly. It's kind of clean gray underneath. In the breeding season, they look like that. And then in non-breeding season, so during winter, then they can get a little bit of streaking on the belly, but during the summer, you don't need to worry about that. What else do we need to say about these? Okay, take a look at their throat. You'll see that it's pretty white compared to the rest of the breast and belly, which is gray. And on the sides, on this large picture, you'll see that they also have kind of a brownish tinge on the sides as well. The bird in general is quite brightly colored, more of a reddish brown color rather than like a gray brown that the some of the other sparrows that we've already looked at were. And they have a pretty bright rufous crown. Yes, a bright rufous crown. The rest of the face is sort of gray. They have that gray eyebrow and gray along the back of the neck as well. Swamp sparrows, as their name would indicate, live in pretty swampy kind of areas. So they're looking at like brushy wetlands, places associated with like shallow standing water that has vegetation in it. You could find a swamp sparrow. And these birds are present all across Newfoundland. This is the fox sparrow. Fox sparrows are a little bit more distinctive than the other ones we've seen already because they are quite large in comparison. They're really like a bigger, more chunky bird. You'll often see them hopping around on the ground, looking for food under leaf litter and things like that. And you'll find them in regenerating forests where there is that bare ground that they can hop around on the ground. They're also found near bogs with low scrubby forest, and they're all across Newfoundland. As you can see, the bird as a whole is more of a rusty brown color. The wings and tail are somewhat brighter, so they're bright rufous. And they have white underparts, but the white underparts are streaked with these really broad, messy streaks that are the same rusty red color. And those do amalgamate into a central splotch in the breast as well. If you look at their head, you'll see that they have a gray eyebrow and a gray nape, which is that area near the bottom of the neck. And so overall, this is kind of a gray and reddish brown bird. This is the white crowned sparrow. I always think that they look kind of angry, like a bit of a grumpy sparrow, just with that face markings that they have. So you'll see that they have plain gray underparts, no streaking there, and no spot in the middle of the breast. On the back, they have kind of a dingier brown. It's not very vibrant, and they have sorry, that's their back and their wings. And then they have those two white stripes on their wings, their white wing stripes. If we look to their head, you'll see that they don't have any of the stripes on their face other than stripes on the top of the head, and also the eyebrow stripe, or sorry, the eye line. So they have a black eye line, they have a broad white eyebrow, and then they have black and white stripes on the crown. But they don't have the malar stripe or the moustachial stripe. The white-crowned sparrow nests in open areas that has stunted trees or near the tree line across the rest of their range. And in Newfoundland, they're really only on the very northern tip of the Northern Peninsula. So if you want to see a white-crowned sparrow, you've got to head up north. Oh, I just changed my slides ahead of time. Okay, the next bird that I accidentally just showed you, it could look quite similar, but just note that the white-crowned sparrow doesn't have any yellow on its body anywhere. Whereas the white-throated sparrow, which is here, it has this bright yellow section on the lores, like at that area right by the bill. But they also have the black and white stripes on the head. So that could be confusing, but so watch for that yellow. And then also the white-throated sparrow has a bright white throat as per their name, which contrasts in a very distinct line with the clean gray color of the breast. If you look at their back, they are sort of this bright rufous color. through the wings and the tail. And you'll notice I have a different colored bird up in the top right corner there. And you might think that it's a female, but it's actually just a different color variation of white-throated sparrows that you can get. So there's two different color variations that they come in. This white striped one, which is the main picture, and then there's a tan striped one. And they're basically the exact same, except for all of the white areas on the head are a tan color, and the black on the head is brown, but they still have that white throat. And this doesn't have anything to do with their age or their sex or their location. It's really just a genetic thing, like the color of our eyes. So it's quite interesting. And I'm going to play the song for you in a second, and probably a lot of you have heard the white-throated sparrow, even if you've never seen it before. And they are found all across Canada in the boreal forest. And they sing a song that says, well, people say that it says, "Oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada." But the song has actually been changing, starting with the birds in the west, and all the way to Ontario, and probably actually farther east by now, that they started singing a different variation of the song where they take out a syllable from each section. So instead of saying, "Oh, Canada, Canada, Canada," they're saying, "Oh, Canna, Canna, Canna." So right now in Newfoundland, we still have the original version of song, but someday, maybe in the future, we'll be hearing the new version. So this is the version we can hear in Newfoundland right now. Perhaps a familiar sound for many of you. Okay, this is our one of our last sparrows. This is the dark-eyed junco. And as you can tell right off the bat, it looks pretty different from the rest of the ones we've seen so far. The males and the females look a little bit different, but it can be really hard to tell sometimes because they have basically the same pattern. But the female, as you can see up in the top right corner there, has just a little bit more of a brown tinge instead of having this really sharp slate gray color that the male in the main picture has. But both males and females have this gray color on the back and a bright white underneath. So it's like you had a gray bird and dipped it in some white paint that got all over its belly. Both males and females also have white outer tail feathers, and you can see those as they're flying by. They might flash those outer tail feathers, and they're a really good mark for telling that it's a junco. You can notice maybe that this bill is just a little pink bill, sharp little pink bill, kind of cute. And both males and females, of course, have that as well. Juncos actually have 6 different subspecies that go across the country, and they all differ in their plumage. So they have different coloration to them, but they do all have that pink bill, and they all have white outer tail feathers. The subspecies that we have in Newfoundland is called the slate-colored junco, and they're widespread throughout the boreal forest. You might have seen the dark-eyed junco around during the winter. They do stick around Newfoundland in the winter, especially if you have a feeder up, you might have seen them. But they do breed, of course, in Newfoundland, and you'll find them in coniferous forests all across the island, as well as in towns as well. They're quite comfortable in towns and small cities. So this is our last sparrow for today. This is the house sparrow. It's actually not incredibly related to the other sparrows we've seen so far, because this is considered an old world sparrow. It was introduced from Europe to North America in 1850, and it's now found sort of everywhere. You can see them all over, anywhere where there's human habitation. They are a cavity nesting bird, so they nest in any little hole or crack they can find. If you have a little gap behind your siding on your house, you might have house sparrows nesting in there. I've seen them in like the transmission boxes on the hydro lines and stuff like that. yeah, they could be found all over the place. So because they're actually not related to our North American sparrows, you won't find them typically in the sparrows section. If you're looking in a field guide, you'll find them usually at the end of the book instead. So just note that if you're taking a look for them. But they do still have, even though they're not quite as related, they do still have a similar body shape as the other sparrows, and they have a similar style bill that's a conical bill with a point at the end, and they're using it again to sort of crack open little seeds as well as collect insects in the summer. The male, which is the main picture here, is a pretty stunning bird. He has a black throat as well as the area by his bill, and a white cheek. The rest of his underparts are gray, and then he has gray on the crown as well, and then this bright chestnut colored patch behind the eye. The female, which is the picture on the top right, she is a bit of a dingier, kind of dirty brown bird, dirty brownish gray, with not many markings to speak of over her body. But if you look carefully at her head, you'll see she has a little bit of a faint supercilium or eyebrow that's a little bit lighter than the rest of her face. Okay, we are done with the sparrows for tonight, so we'll move on to the finches and the grosbeaks. And just before we get into it, I just want to let you know that we're going to have 3 species that have grosbeak in their name. And 2 of them, the pine grosbeak and the evening grosbeak, are part of the finches, rather than, which is the family Fringillidae, rather than the family grosbeaks, which is cardinal, I can never say this word, but you could read it there, Cardinalidae, which is the rose-breasted grosbeak. So again, if you're looking for these, any of these 3 species in your field guide, they won't be in the same location because they're actually different families. So we'll start with the only grosbeak that we really have in Newfoundland, which is the rose-breasted grosbeak from the grosbeak family. And this bird is not actually known to breed in Newfoundland, but every year we do have some males and females that both arrive in the spring, and the males are often singing. So there is potential for breeding, so I'm including them here. They're typically using deciduous forests, which is why they're not super common in Newfoundland. And they're a pretty large bird. They're only a little bit smaller than a robin. As you can see on both the male and the female, they have a really thick, hardy pink bill. And the male, which is that picture, well, the bright colored bird, he is this really stark black and white bird. So black all over the head and the back and the wings and the tail. But then he has those white patches on the wings, a white rump and belly. And then if you take a look at the picture on the top right, you'll also see very clearly that he has this incredible bright red sort of teardrop patch on his breast. The female in comparison is on the bottom right. She is a brown bird overall. She has sort of a paler belly, but she has brown streaking on the belly. And she has white wing bars as well as the male does. If we look to her face, you'll see that she has a really thick white eyebrow, goes all the way from the bill down to the back of the head and almost down the neck as well. Okay, so that was our one grosbeak family, grosbeak, and we'll move on to the finches. So for the finches, you can see all the species over here on the right. Take a look at all their bills, and you'll notice that they're all sort of a conical shape like the sparrows had, but they can range a lot in size of the bill, from very heavy to very thin and pointed, and that just depends on the size of the bird really and what they're eating, how big the seeds are that they're cracking open. So if you're trying to figure out what species it is, looking at the size of the bill is a good place to start for finches. When you're watching any of the finches fly, you'll notice that they don't fly sort of in a straight, steady line. They fly in an undulating way, so they're swooping up and down, sort of in this gradual up and down flight. The pictures that I have here are the males. The males of finches are typically more colorful and the females are duller. So I will be having pictures of males and females here. And the finches are often found high up in trees rather than hopping around on the ground for the most part. Whereas the sparrows that we had earlier are typically lower down and hopping around on the ground sometimes. So the finches, if any of you have feeders up in the winter, you might be getting some of these species now. They stick around Newfoundland during the winter. They join into big flocks or groups that travel around looking for food. And so that can, of course, include feeders in people's backyards, but other areas where they can find food as well, where they're looking for seeds and cones. So our first finch is the evening grosbeak. The evening grosbeak is a pretty large, chunky bird. And you can see that the male, who's he's this really bright yellow bird, and he has really an unmistakable bright yellow eyebrow. It looks like someone put it on there with plasticine or something. He has, other than the yellow on him, he has brown over the top of the head and down the neck and cheeks. And then his wings are really black, as well as the tail being black. And then, so that's the primaries, which is one of the flight feathers. And then he also has these big white patches on top of his wings, and those are from the secondaries, which are another flight feather that's farther in, closer to the body. When they fold their wings up, then those are on top, and they're this vibrant white. The female and the male both have this really large pale bill, so look for that when you're looking at these birds. And the female otherwise is kind of brownish color over her body and head, but she has a bit of greenish, a greenish tinge or greenish yellow tinge to the nape of the neck. And then she also has black wings and tail with just white patches on the wings instead of having those big white patches that are fully covering the wing like the males have. Evening grosbeaks are found mostly in the southern portion of the island, but they can be found sort of all over. Oh, and I also meant to say that females can have a varying amount of yellow on their body. So you can have some that are more yellow than this picture and some with less yellow than that picture as well. Okay, this is an American goldfinch. Maybe they're familiar to many of you if you live in the more southern portion of Newfoundland. The males are this brilliant yellow color, bright yellow body with a black forehead, black wings and black tail. And again, they have white wing bars on them as well. The female, which is on the top right there, she is a bit more understated. She's got a brownish yellow body with pale underparts, but she also has black wings and a black tail, and she has white wing bars on her wings as well. And you'll just take a look at their bill here, and you can see that they have sort of a medium-sized orange bill. American goldfinches are one that if they're in your area, you've probably heard them flying around above you, and they really do that undulating flight quite excessively. So you might notice them flying around, and they actually breed quite a bit later than most of the other songbirds that we have in Newfoundland. So most songbirds are starting to breed at the beginning of June and finishing up sort of in late July, whereas the American goldfinch is only starting in mid or late July. So that's as a little interesting tidbit for you. They are found in deciduous trees and younger forests, and so that does mean that they can often be found in towns as well. Okay, we also have pine siskins in Newfoundland. I think of them as sort of like a more streaked, sharper version of a goldfinch. They're a similar size and structure, but if you take a look at their bill, it's really sharp and slender, very, very pointy. Males and females look pretty similar for pine siskins. So I personally wouldn't be able to tell a male and a female apart, but there is a varying amount of yellow that they can have for either sex. And males can be more yellow than females, but there's definitely some overlap. So it's not really a reliable marker. So overall, the pine siskin has heavy streaking on the back and also on the sides as well. And then they have yellow edges on the tail and on the wing feathers. So even in the larger picture here, where the bird is not quite as yellow, you can still see yellow edging on the wing feathers. Pine siskins are found nesting in open coniferous forests and younger mixed forests. And in the wintertime, they'll come to feeders, but they really like the cones on alder bushes in the winter as well. They'll sit on the bushes and pluck the teeny little seeds out of those small alder cones. And this is a cool picture of them at a feeder. And I just wanted to point out that in flight, if you look at that bird on the bottom there with the arrows, they have a bright yellow wing stripe when their wing is open, and also a bright yellow tail stripe, which of course, as I mentioned, can vary with the amount of yellow, but that is always there present. And even if they're flying overhead, you can sometimes see that they have that yellow tinge to them. So this is another finch species. This is the common redpoll. Especially in the wintertime, they really look just like a little fluffy ball of a bird. They get so fluffed up. They're a pretty pale kind of brown bird. They have a white belly, and then the males on the left here and the females on the right. As you can see, they look really similar, but the male has some red on the breast, a little red tinge, and the female does not have that red tinge. She just has a pale color on the breast. So the males can have a varying amount of red, but there is always some red tinge there. And both the males and females have red forehead, which is how they get their name, redpoll, because poll is a name for head back in the day, I guess. The male and female both have sort of this dark area around the bill. It's definitely darker on the male here, but as you can see, the stubby yellow bill really comes out, or really shows up strongly against that dark area around the face. Common redpolls are pretty small, so they're feeding on just smaller seeds of like herbaceous plants, like of smaller grasses and things like that. But they do live in coniferous and mixed forests all across Newfoundland, but they're not quite as common in the southwest area as they are in other parts. We'll move on now to the purple finch. Their name is pretty good, I think, since, as you can see, the male there on the bottom is this sort of raspberry purplish pink color all over his body. It's like you dipped the whole bird into like a tub of raspberry jam. You can see on the male and female that they have a heavy triangular bill. It's quite a large one, but not as big as the ones we've seen on the grosbeaks. And the female up on the top right, she's a brown bird overall. She has brown back and brown streaks on a pale breast and belly. And then if you look to her head, you can see that she has a bit of a white eyebrow that starts above the eye and goes down behind the head. So we'll just compare her to the female of the rose-breasted grosbeak. So even though the rose-breasted grosbeak is not very common in Newfoundland, you could be confused between these two because they do look quite similar. So some points of comparison for these two is that the purple finch female doesn't have any white wing bars. They have no markings on their wing. That's the same with the male. Whereas the female rose-breasted grosbeak does have those white wing bars. Another thing to look at is the white eyebrow that they both have. So the rose-breasted grosbeak, the eyebrow, the white starts right behind the bill and goes all the way down the back of the neck, whereas the purple finch, the white eyebrow starts just above the eye, so it doesn't extend forward to the bill. The purple finches also can come around to feeders in the winter, but in the summertime, you're generally going to be finding them in coniferous forests, and you can find them all across the island of Newfoundland. This is the pine grosbeak. They're also known as mopes. That's because they're a pretty dopey bird. They'll sit often on the ground, and they're moving pretty slowly sometimes. They don't get really easily startled by human presence. So they sort of moping around. So it's a fun little name for them. The male, again, is a pinkish red all over the body, with some gray feathers sort of scattered around. If you take a look at the bill of the male and female, it's a black bill, short and heavy, and it has a little bit of curve at the end of it as well, if you get a really close look at them. The males and females both have black wings as well as a black tail, and they have a white wing bar on those wings as well. If you look to the female there on the top right, you'll see that she's gray all over, but she has sort of a greenish yellow feathers on the top of the head and also on the rump. And the amount of yellow that is in the female can vary a lot as well. So you can sometimes have quite yellow females that are all over the, kind of yellow all over the body. And then you can have ones that are really gray like this one. Something that I noticed today, just when I was looking over the presentation, that I've never noticed before is that they also have like a sort of paler gray arc underneath of the eye. And it seems to be, I haven't found it in my field guide, but from all of the pictures of pine grosbeaks that I then looked at today, it seemed to be a common mark for them. So could be something interesting to look for when you're looking at a pine grosbeak. Pine grosbeaks are found all across Newfoundland, and they use open black spruce forest that are close to bogs or wetlands for nesting in. But you could also find them near towns, in parks near towns, or in more remote areas. So they're sort of all over the place. If we look at the shape of this bird, just before I move on, you'll see that the head is actually almost looking like it's flattened, as opposed to like the really rounded head that we've seen on a lot of the other birds today. Okay, we're moving on to our last two species of the night. This one here is the white-winged crossbill. Crossbills are super cool because, well, for a lot of reasons, actually. As you would expect from their name, if you look at their face, their bill is actually crossed over. So most birds have the top and the bottom section of the bill mesh up together evenly, but crossbills on purpose have evolved to have the tip of the bill cross over itself. And that's because of the way that they feed. So crossbills strictly eat the seeds out of coniferous cones, like the ones you can see in the picture. And what they do with their bill is they have it a little bit open so that the tips are meeting each other. And then they slip it in between the scales of the cone. And then they close the bill, which means that the tips are pushing the scales apart so they can stick their tongue in and grab out the seed that's inside. It's super cool. So if you ever have a chance to watch them eating, I would highly recommend it. So because they are strictly eating coniferous cone seeds, they are found, of course, in coniferous forest all the time. And crossbills white-winged crossbills as well as red crossbills, which I'll get to on the next slide, they both travel around in flocks to trees that have a lot of cones available, and so they're feeding on those seeds. And because they eat seeds rather than insects, like the rest of, or a lot of the rest of the songbirds in Newfoundland, they don't breed strictly in the summer season like most of these other birds do. They will actually breed anytime year round, as long as there's enough coniferous cones available for them to feed their young. So they could even be they could be breeding right now in Newfoundland. Yeah, as long as there's enough cones available. Super cool. Anyway, so the white-winged crossbill here, when we're looking to identify them, other than if you can't get a look at that bill, which is a pretty telltale sign, we can see that the male, like the last few species we've seen, is a pinkish red all over the body. He has black wings and a black tail, and has these white patches on the wings, like his name says, white-winged. And you'll also notice, if you look at his face, that he has sort of a dark crescent at the back of the head on the neck. The female also has that dark crescent, but it's definitely harder to see. But you can see that she's sort of a greenish yellow all over the body. That amount of color can vary, again, like the last few species we've talked about. But she also has black wings and a black tail, and she also has white wing bars, which is important to her name. So this is our final species for the night, and this is the red crossbill. As you can see, they also have that super cool crossed bill, like their name tells you. And the male is again red sort of all over the body, but he can have some yellow feathers coming through as well. And there's a varying amount of yellow feathers that he can have scattered around the body. And he has brown wings with no white on them. So that's a key mark between the white-winged crossbill and the red crossbill, that there's no white on the wings. The female is up there in the top right corner. You can see that she's sort of a greenish brown, kind of grayish color. In the exact color can vary a lot between individuals, depending on how much greenish color they have in there. But again, they have brown wings and they have no white marking on the wing. So as long as you can get a look at that bill and take a look at the wing, you'll know which crossbill you have. Since they are also crossbills, like I was saying, and they're dependent on coniferous seeds, they're also going to be found in mature coniferous forest all the time. Sorry, losing my voice. Since they need that, of course, to feed on. Okay, so that is all of the birds for tonight. So I do have, of course, a fun little quiz here at the end, perfectly anonymous, just for fun. So we'll go through a few species here and you can see how confusing they've been, or if you're feeling good about it. So here's our first species. Let me see if I can, hopefully that worked okay. So which species do you see here? If the poll window is in the way of the picture, you should be able to drag it around your screen to be able to see the picture again. Okay, things are looking good here. Close this down in a second. Alrighty. So this is an American goldfinch, as 97% of you said. The evening grosbeak also is bright yellow. So I could see how that could be confusing, but for the grosbeak, we're really looking for that big, heavy bill, that really chunky bill instead of the sharp pointed one. And they are yellow and black, but they have that really bright yellow eyebrow that looks like someone put some plasticine on their face. Okay, very good. Moving on to our next bird here. Oh, I don't think I did it right again. I don't know why. I can't figure this out this year. Okay, what is this bird? I think the poll should be showing. Yes, it is. Catherine asked me last week if I was going to be nicer with my my quiz this week, so we'll have to see what you all think. Okay, I'll just leave this open for a few more seconds here. And I'll close it down. So this bird here, the majority of you got that right. This is a white-throated sparrow. I put in some look-alike birds here to test your skills. So the white-crowned sparrow also has those black and white stripes on the head that are really distinct, but the white-crowned sparrow doesn't have any yellow on the face, so it can't be that one. And the Savannah sparrow does have yellow there behind the eye, but it doesn't have the black and white stripes on the head, and also doesn't have that really distinct line between the white throat and the rest of the body. They're sort of more brown streaked on the side instead. Okay, here's our next bird. And who is this guy? There's lots of people joining this question here. Very good. I'll close it down in just a couple of seconds. Okay, so I'm 97% of you are correct. This is a dark-eyed junco. It's really the only bird that we have here that is this fully gray on the back and then fully white on the bottom. And then also take a note at those white outer tail feathers. You can even see them as the tail's folded up there. And those are all key marks for a dark-eyed junco. Very nice. Here is our next one. Okay, who's this bird? Those answers trickling in, but I'll close it down in a couple seconds. Okay. So again, we have the majority correct here. 93% said common redpoll. This is a common redpoll. We're really looking for them for sort of brown and white streaky body, but with that red patch on the head. So the purple finches do have, purple finches and pine grosbeaks do have red on them, but we're expecting it sort of over, for the males at least, for over the rest of their body, rather than just on the top of the forehead. And the females wouldn't have any red on them at all. All right, very nice. Onwards to this one here. Who is this bird? Answers are coming in quickly here. Okay, I'll just close this down in a second. All right. So this is in fact a male evening grosbeak. Well done. The white-winged crossbill, I guess when we're looking at this bird here, one of the first things that I notice is really that bright yellow eyebrow, which is that goes, sorry, that bright yellow supercilium that goes all the way back across the head. That's really key for the evening grosbeak, as well as that really big heavy bill. So the pine grosbeak also has a big heavy bill, but it's either for the male like a pinkish red color, or for the female doesn't have this bright bright colors of the white and black on the wing and the yellow. The white wing crossbill has definitely a different shaped bill because it has those crossed bill. It's quite a bit thinner. Also don't have that stripe on the forehead, and the male is going to be pinkish color, and the female, even though they have white on the wings, it's certainly not to this extent that this whole the whole wing is covered with white like that. These are all tricky. Okay, we just have, I think I put 8 in, so we have a couple more here. So who is this bird? This is a tricky one, I think. It's maybe not as tricky as I thought it was. I'll just leave it open for a couple more seconds. Okay, I'll close this down now. Even though I thought it was a hard one, 71% of you thought it was pretty easy, and it's a Savannah sparrow, so you're correct. We're looking for Savannah sparrows at that yellow patch in front of the eye. So song sparrows, Lincoln sparrows don't have yellow on them. So we can eliminate those. The white-throated sparrow does have yellow, but then we're looking at that really vibrant black and white stripes on the head, as well as a white throat instead of this dark colored throat that we see on the Savannah sparrow. Okay, on to number 7. Yes, this is the second last one. Okay, who is this bird? I'll just leave it open a few more seconds. This one seems to be a tricky one, definitely. Okay, I'll close this up. Okay, so we have a pretty even split here between swamp sparrow and chipping sparrow, but this is a swamp sparrow. We are looking at sort of the reddish rusty color over the whole back. So that's good for swamp sparrow, chipping sparrow, and American tree sparrow, which is probably why we have these answers here. For the chipping sparrow, you would have the eye line going also in front of the eye and connecting to the bill. So it can't be a chipping sparrow because it's pale there and gray. And the American tree sparrow would have a bicolor bill, so it has yellow on the bottom and black on the top. And it would also have white wing bars on it, on the chipping sparrow. So this is a swamp sparrow, but that was a really hard one. And they are difficult in real life as well. Okay, this is our final bird for the night. answers came in quick here, so I'll close it really soon. Okay, I'm going to close that up. And this is, in fact, a white-winged crossbill. So it's a male of any of the species that I gave you as options because it's this pink color. When we see that bill there with the crossed, the two crossed mandibles, the two sections of the bill, we know it's a crossbill. And because it has white on the wings, we know it must be a white-winged crossbill instead of a red crossbill. The pine grosbeak, the color is good for that, but they would have a little less white on the wing. The wing bars are definitely less distinct, and they would have that big heavy bill instead of this cross bill that we see here. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. And that concludes our presentation for tonight. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We will be sending up a follow-up email that has the recording if you want to rewatch anything or share it with a friend. Get in touch with us if you want to get involved in any of the programs. And you can follow us on social media if that's something you like to do as well. Catherine, do we have any questions in the chat, even though we're a little over time?
We've had a few questions, but I think we've handled them all. We've been having an interesting discussion about whether crossbills could get into sealed cones, you know, the very young cones where there's no openings. It turns out they can, but obviously they're a little bit slower at that. So I think, yeah, I had to look this up because I actually never seen a crossbill take a very young cone, but they can get in there. They just bite between the cones first, or bite between the scales first.
Oh, interesting.
I'm just reading the chat as it's coming in. Lots and lots of thank you. Some very nice compliments about you being a great science communicator, and I'll back that one up. Yeah, we had some questions about whether fox sparrows are here year round. There are the occasional strays that are, as it turns out. I checked on eBird to make sure that I wasn't imagining fox sparrow reports, but for the most part, no. Yeah. Oh, hang on. So we have a question here. For many of these species, how soon do the young show their colors?
A lot of these species, I guess, when do they molt into their first real plumage? A lot of them during the end of the summer and in the early fall, they'll be similar, but with a lot heavier streaking all over their breast and belly, like no matter if they have streaking in the adult version or not. And wish I remembered better about my molt patterns, but they might keep that streaky plumage up until the spring of the next year. I don't know, Catherine, if you can.
I think you've got it mostly right. It's hard to necessarily generalize in this case, particularly because, again, I'm trying to think my molt patterns through. I think that some colorations, for example, the carotenoids that make the sort of reddish and orangish colorations, they are actually based in diet. So I can imagine that it might take juveniles some time to accrue the necessary pigments from their diet. So I suspect it's a question that varies from species to species.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do have another question here about the cones. We're back to the cones. So Amira and I have been talking about the cones. And okay, the question is whether they eat them without dropping the cones. And actually, Birds of the World specifically said that with young cones, they tend to twist them off the branch first. That's the very first thing they do, and then they get them on the ground. With older cones that are easier to access, they don't intentionally take them off trees, but they usually end up falling off anyway because they get twisted around while the bird is eating. Okay. And again, just more thank yous. And somebody, I can't find the comment now because there's a lot coming in on the chat, but people are appreciating the testing, and somebody said they got 100% for the first time.
Wow.
So Jenna, you are nicer than I am. Although
Well
that
done.
swamp chipping sparrow, American tree sparrow question, that was a hard one.
That was a hard one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come in. So I think we'll call it a night, but thank you guys again for coming out tonight, and we'll be back next week with a presentation about other passerines, which is sort of our catch-all everything we haven't talked about so far category.
One of my favorites. All the thrushes will be in there.
All the thrushes, and this year we're going to get the horned lark in there too.
Yeah,
we
very
forgot
good.
the horned lark last year, which is sad because it's one of my favorites. So
all right, see you all next week, hopefully. Have a lovely
thanks
week.
A lot, Jenna. Excellent presentation as always.
Thanks, Catherine. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.